Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
On February 17th of 2014, a young man murdered a teenager after luring him in over the internet. Afterwards, he called the police and admitted to killing him. This is the disturbing case of Louis Daines. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also procrastinating when it comes down to doing laundry. Let's just say I've got a lot of work to do. But today, we're going over the case of Louis Daines, a deranged, baby-faced sociopath who preyed on teenagers online. You're going to learn about the darker nature of the internet and why it's important to make sure your kids don't talk to strangers. For our story, we're heading across the pond all the way over to the United Kingdom, particularly a little place called Surrey, England. Surrey is a charming old county located in the southeast region of the country. It has a population of around 1.2 million people and a large rural area with countless green pastures and farms. In addition, there's plenty of urban parts too. Overall, the county has a rich and diverse history, including being the home of the first documented game of cricket. If you ever find yourself in this large English region, there's definitely no shortage of things to do. You can take a visit to the Hannah Pesher Sculpture Garden and stroll through a gallery of unique-looking pieces of art. As long as you have an appointment, of course. You could stop by the British Wildlife Centre and catch a wide variety of different animals, some of which have furry little ears. You could walk over to Waverley Abbey and see the ruins of 12th century architecture along with the ghosts that probably live there. You could even pay to enter the Thorpe Park area where you can ride a bunch of cool roller coasters and stuff. But despite how downright exhilarating all of these activities sound, none of them are the reason as to why we're in Surrey today. Breck David Lefebvre Bednar was born in Surrey, England on March 17th of 1999 to his parents Barry Bednar and Lauren Lefebvre. Barry was an oil trading and shipping consultant, while his wife Lauren worked for a school and served as a teaching assistant. The two of them originally lived in the United States and Colorado, but later moved to the UK a few years before Breck was born. In fact, even their son's name, Breck, came from the place where the two of them met and fell in love. It's a town called Breckenridge. Regardless, Breck's parents got divorced in 2006 when he was about 7 years old. From then on, the two of them had shared custody of their son. Breck had 3 siblings that were triplets, 1 brother and 2 sisters. His personality was very warm-hearted and relaxed, and as a young child, he was highly intelligent and good with technology. According to his mother, Lauren, he used to walk around with a tool belt imitating Bob the Builder and acting like he was fixing things. But once he got a little older, he actually became pretty skilled at fixing things for real. Whenever Lauren or his siblings needed something repaired, like a computer or anything electronic, they asked him to do it for them and he'd have it finished within a couple of minutes. To Breck's family, this was some sort of like wizardry or something. It's no surprise then that his younger siblings looked up to him as much as they did and always asked him questions and tried to get his advice. From elementary up until middle school, Breck attended private schools. But at a certain point, the cost became too much, and so when he entered 9th grade, he had to start going to public school. The school he attended is known as St. Bede's School, and it's located in a town in Surrey, England called Red Hill. It's a highly ranked institution with over 1,700 students. Here, he felt disconnected and missed the friends that he made at his old school, but he tried to make the most of it and fit in as much as possible. Sooner or later, though, he found himself reconnecting with his old companions. This involved becoming part of a tight-knit gaming group. By now, Breck had already become a frequent gamer and was skilled and proficient at building his own computers. The setup he created for himself included 3 separate screens with the game he was playing on one, the chat on another, and the last one for whatever else he wanted. When Breck and his friends played games online, they talked to each other through online servers, and they were constantly on the lookout for the best ones. On top of this gaming habit, Breck was part of something known as the Air Training Corps, which is a British military youth organization sponsored by the state. This program put him on a path of fulfilling a long-held dream of eventually becoming a pilot. It also made his mother happy because it allowed him to go out and get some exercise rather than staying inside all day and playing video games. But even when he was inside playing games, the ones he played were flight simulators, so his focus was always on making his dream come true. However, within only a year of reconnecting with his friends and playing with them online, someone else began feeding Breck their own vision of what his future could look like. This was a young baby-faced man by the name of Lewis Danes. Lewis and Breck met through an online server that Lewis ran, and right from the get-go, he started filling Breck's head with completely outrageous fantasies. Despite being only 17 years old when they first met, he told Breck and his friends that he was a multi-millionaire and an undercover agent for the FBI. He said that yes, he was British, because of course they could all hear the British accent, but that he actually lived in New York City and had various different government contracts and stated missions. Now, while all of this certainly sounded over the top, Breck and his friends bought it, hook, line, and sinker. To them, Lewis was almost like some sort of mentor or something. He had a wide range of knowledge about things like website building, coding, and financial advice. In reality, though, he was a perfect example of a highly manipulative sociopath. But before I explain exactly how Lewis led Breck into a sinister trap, let's first go over who he actually was behind the curtains. So Lewis Mark Danes was born in October of 1995 in Harold Wood, Essex. His father was a customs officer while his mother worked at a hospital as a nurse. Growing up, he was extremely awkward, socially inept, and an only child. He was raised by a single mother who ended up abandoning him when he was very young. From then on, he lived in care facilities and constantly moved from one temporary home to the next. Eventually, though, he wound up living with his father. In 2010, at only 14 years old, Lewis began showing signs of manipulative behavior. On his private game server over the internet, he attempted to convince a young boy to travel from the United States to his home in England, offering him a job as an administrator on the server. The boy then begged his parents to let him do such a thing, but naturally, they refused. A year later, in 2011, Lewis then did a similar thing with another boy, but this time he was actually successful, partly because he and the boy went to the same school and they were in much closer proximity to each other. Shortly afterwards, though, this boy reported Lewis to the school authorities and accused him of hacking the school's computers. In conjunction with the local police, an investigation was done into these accusations, but they never found any concrete evidence and Lewis was never officially charged with anything. However, he most certainly did hack the computers. Now, as for the accusation, well, he was put on a national registry for the authorities to keep an eye on him. After that, his father kicked him out of his home and he temporarily went to live with his grandmother instead. But unsurprisingly, she found him far too challenging to live with as well, so he eventually just wound up living on his own in an apartment that belonged to his grandparents. In early 2013, Lewis then met Breck Bednar over his internet server and thus began the beginning of a terrible series of events. At some point, after becoming acquainted with the 17-year-old Lewis Danes, Breck's mother became aware of their so-called friendship. Every now and again, she would walk in while Breck was gaming to talk to him about something, and pretty soon, Breck was relaying to her the same absurd fantasies and poisonous lies that Lewis was feeding him. He told her all about Lewis and his millionaire lifestyle and how he used to be a computer programmer. And when she inevitably questioned how he acquired all this money at such a young age, Breck simply brushed it off by saying he was just that clever and resourceful. She also became aware of how the server operated and the fact that there was a decent amount of bullying occurring on there. Lewis had full control over it, with the ability to invite, kick out, or censor anyone that he wanted. So essentially, if you weren't playing by his rules, you could easily be ostracized and removed from the entire friend group. Pretty soon, Lewis started working on a sinister project of turning everyone against each other, except for him and Breck. Over the course of the year 2013, Lewis was feeding Breck more and more lies until eventually Breck completely isolated himself from the outside world. He was now spending an exorbitant amount of time on his computer at home, and instead of dreaming of becoming a pilot, Lewis promised him a corporate job at Microsoft. Whenever Breck talked to his mother and siblings at dinner time, and when he wasn't online, which was rarely, he would talk about Lewis and in terms of Lewis. It was always Lewis this and Lewis that and Lewis says and Lewis tells me. Eventually, after Lewis's attempt to turn Breck against his friends was successful, he moved on to trying to turn Breck against his own family, particularly his mother, Lauren. During a team meeting on Lewis's server, he told Breck that he was spending too much time with his family and letting them control him. They were getting in the way of his success, and he needed to spend more time online. Soon, Lewis then drafted up a full 2-page memo detailing the criteria that Breck should and shouldn't put up with in regards to his mother. It was basically a written attack on her by some random guy who she never even met. According to Breck's mother, Lauren, the critiques included things such as telling Breck's mother that she had too many rules, that Breck shouldn't have to eat family meals, and that Breck shouldn't have to go on family walks or hang out with them. And at the end of it, Lewis even inscribed his own signature, adding the words written and edited by Lewis Danes. Clearly, this was one step too far. In response to this strange attack on her and the growing resentment by her son, Lauren quickly realized that she needed to take some action. After contacting the local police, they apparently told her on 3 separate occasions that they were going to investigate her claims about Lewis Danes and recommended that she keep her son away from the computer. This was December of 2013, and by the time Christmas rolled around, it seemed like things were finally improving with Breck and his near cult-like obsession with Lewis Danes. His interactions with his family returned to normal for a little while, and for good measure, Lauren restricted her son's use of electronics, so now he was down to just using an MP3 player. In addition, Breck promised his mother that he was going to cut ties with Lewis for good. Shortly after the Christmas period, however, things were about to take a turn for the worse. Now that a little time had passed and her son's behavior had improved, Lauren allowed Breck to regain access to his electronics. Within only a few weeks, he quickly slipped back into his old habits. Unbeknownst to Breck's mother, the moment that he got back on his computer, he caught back up with Lewis. It had now been several weeks since they last spoke, and in exchange for so much time spent separated from each other, Lewis doubled down on his wooing on Breck. Right away, he sent him a bunch of free games and gadgets, including a mobile phone that Breck could use to secretly communicate with him without his mother realizing. Pretty soon, the two of them agreed to finally meet in person. But before that could take place, Breck was scheduled to take a school trip to Spain in February of 2014. On February 5th, this trip commenced, and while in Spain, Breck had an absolutely fantastic experience. The weather, the scenery, the food. It was all a very nice break away from the cold and wet winter of where he lived in England. On top of all this, he even found a girl to occupy his time with, and the two of them took a picture together and posted it on Facebook. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away back in England, the toadish and demented Lewis Danes was feeling increasingly insecure about his hold over Breck. Despite buying him a secret phone so the two of them could communicate in private during his trip, Breck wasn't responding to any of the text messages Lewis sent to him, and in each successive message, he sounded angrier and angrier. Eventually, he stumbled across the picture that Breck posted with a girl on his Facebook page, and he became absolutely furious. He told Breck that she looked like a and that posting pictures online together would make people think that they had. Lewis could feel his grip over Breck becoming looser and looser, and so he knew he had to act fast. Quickly, he made up a lie that he was dying and he needed someone to pass his business on to. Therefore, the two of them, him and Breck, would have to meet very soon before he croaked, so that way he could go over the details with him. He also said that he just recently moved back to the UK after living in New York and was now living in an apartment in Essex. How convenient, right? But regardless, it was at this point that he and Breck finally made plans to meet in person for the first time on February 16th, the day after Breck returned from Spain. By now, the two of them had been in contact for a little over a year in total, and because Breck knew how his mom felt about Lewis, he obviously didn't inform her about resuming communication with him. The same day Breck arrived back home, on the 15th of February, his mother flew to Spain herself for a teaching event. It was scheduled to last for a few days, and in the meantime, the plan was for Breck's father to look after the 4 kids while she was away. It's not clear whether or not Breck's father, Barry, was aware of the situation with him and Lewis. So when on the day after he came back, Breck told his father that he planned to stay the night at a friend's house, Barry didn't question it too much. The following is then the cruel and terrible series of events that transpired. So first, on the 16th of February, Breck got into a taxi and told his father that he was going over a friend's house. Next, Breck was driven to Lewis's apartment in Grays in Essex. At 7:43 a.m., he then got out of the taxi, Lewis came out to pay for it, and afterwards, the two were officially introduced to each other for the first time after talking online for a year. Despite only living in a small apartment, Lewis was somehow able to explain away this fact in a convincing manner. After that, he continued manipulating Breck and got him to send messages to his father asking him to stay the night. Then, like we already talked about earlier, Breck's father Barry agreed and the two of them stayed the night together. Around 6 p.m., a pizza arrived at Lewis's apartment. Now, as for what exactly happened the next 24 hours while Lewis and Breck were hanging out, it's still unclear. But at some point, Barry became worried that his son was no longer responding to his text messages. So he called his ex-wife Lauren in Spain and asked her if she had heard from their son. When she said no, she then hung up with him real quick and started calling all of Breck's friends to see if they knew where he was. Breck's friends told her that the last time they spoke to him, Breck was busy hanging out with his friend Lewis. The moment she heard the name Lewis, her heart sank into the bottom of her chest. Here was a mother who was trying all she could to get her child to stay away from this online vulture, taking away his electronics, talking to him about the dangers, and even contacting the police. And yet, the moment that she leaves for a few days, he's spending the night over this guy's house. Nevertheless, the following morning at 11:06 a.m., Lewis Danes made the dreaded phone call that we played for you earlier. Here it is again.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
My name is Lewis Danes. I'm 18 years old, and I live...
Right, okay. And what's actually happened?
My friend came to stay the night with me yesterday, feeling very down, feeling suicidal. And I woke up this morning, he was in a mess. I tried to calm him down. I hugged him, then said that I was there for him. He shrugged me off.
Can you just bear with me a second? Don't tell me any more, okay? You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you he's definitely dead. I have a penknife on the side of, in my room, adjacent to my bed. I have a chest of drawers. After shaving the TV and stuff on there, I had a penknife on there, folded. He picked it up, opened it, and then lost control.
Slow down. Let me just take those details here. Penknife on the bedside table. Brett grabbed this.
Yeah.
What, in order to harm himself?
No, in order to harm me. He opened it and
Right,
then lost
okay.
control. Look, are the police on their way? I can hear something.
They are.
Okay, I'm going to go and do my part. Please, thank you for your help.
Right, just listen.
When police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene of the crime, they went inside Lewis's home and found Breck on Lewis's bed, lying unresponsive with his throat slit. He was bleeding extensively and restrained with duct tape wrapped around his hands and feet. Despite their best efforts to revive him, the 14-year-old Breck Bednar was officially pronounced dead at 12:02 p.m. Authorities then did a sweep of Lewis Daines' flat and found a boatload of evidence. It became pretty clear that Lewis had made a pitiful effort to cover up his tracks. In his bathroom sink, sitting in a pool of water, was a bunch of computer parts, some of which were partly broken. In another room, there was a bunch of Breck's clothes tied up in a plastic garbage bag. And on Lewis's computer, they found an Amazon order from a month before that included duct tape, condoms, and syringes. Evidently, the murder had a sexual element to it. Pretty soon, Lewis Daines was then arrested and taken to the local police department in Essex. Meanwhile, Breck Bednar's family was absolutely devastated. About an hour before Lewis called the police and admitted to quote-unquote unintentionally killing Breck, he had taken pictures of Breck's dead body and sent them to two of their mutual friends that were part of the same gaming community that they were. Soon after that, the news spread quickly about Breck's murder. Before he was even officially pronounced dead, his 12-year-old siblings were already receiving messages about it through Instagram and text. None of them wanted to believe it. But shortly after the authorities discovered Breck's body, they contacted his parents and told them the unfortunate news. With two police cars outside of their home, Breck's father then went into the family's home, shut the door, and called in a family meeting. He told the family that Breck was dead, and together they began to grieve. When Breck's mother in Spain heard about her son's death, her grief was compounded with regret. After doing all that she could to stop such a thing from happening, it was heartbreaking to see her worst fears come true. But according to information that came out later, the blame certainly couldn't be placed exclusively on her. Apparently, the multiple times Lauren contacted the police station a few months prior, nobody looked into the situation. This was despite assuring her that on 3 separate occasions, they were going to investigate. In reality, they had just closed the case right away the moment that she called. So all I can really say about that is shame on them. That's absolutely terrible. But at the same time, Breck's family was feeling grief and regret. A different police station in Grays, Essex was getting fed a series of lies. The stone-faced Lewis Daines was now being interrogated by the police. He tried lying to them and telling them that terrorists had broken into his home and forced Breck to kill himself. He also refused to hand over any of the passwords to his devices. But once police got around to collecting all of the evidence, cracked the codes to his computer, and finished the autopsy of Breck's body, it was all more than enough to charge the 18-year-old Lewis with murder. After initially pleading not guilty, he later switched over to admitting to being guilty, and in January 12th of 2015, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years, meaning there's a possibility he'll be out by the time he's in his 40s. But even with Lewis Daines being behind bars for a long period of time, for the Bednar family, it soon seemed like this nightmare would never end. In late 2015 to 2016, Lewis started a blog from prison that attempted to repudiate all the claims made by Breck's family and the media. He argued that one of Breck's parents was abusive and that this was the reason why Breck became so attached to him. And he also claimed that the reason why the fight between the two of them ensued was because Breck became angry and that Lewis had his bags packed and was ready to leave the country. Obviously, this was all nonsense, but for a family trying to grieve, it didn't help. Breck's mother, Lauren, later tried to get the blog taken down and thought about suing for harassment, but her efforts were unsuccessful and she was unable to do so. Regardless, in the time since his death, Breck's family has now established the Breck Foundation to raise awareness of online danger and promote responsible use of the internet. They also successfully sued the Surrey police for mishandling the case and received an undisclosed sum in compensation. And while the grieving process will continue to last throughout the rest of their lives, At the very least, they're keeping his memory alive with all of their efforts and trying to prevent things like this from happening again in the future. But overall, the entire case is a cruel tragedy. Breck Bednar was a promising young kid searching for guidance and companionship. Playing games over the internet was supposed to be a refuge from the growing pains of being a teenager and adapting to a new school, but in the end, it turned out to be his downfall. I hope he's resting peacefully, and I hope the vile perpetrator responsible for this heinous crime spends the rest of his life behind bars. If you yourself know someone who's potentially being manipulated, catfished, or bullied online, please contact the necessary authorities as soon as possible. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. I also have a second account with my brother named Horrifying where we tell stories about everything paranormal. This includes true crime, mysteries, and things that are just downright spooky. I'd greatly appreciate if you subscribe to that too. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.